All right, hello guys. We should hopefully be live. Let me make sure on my laptop that we're good to go. We should be up and running. So, hi guys. Welcome. We're doing another character analysis this week. We're going to continue with, I think, the Five Kings. I'm a really big fan of the War of the Five Kings just in general. So I decided we're going to do Stannis. We did Renly last week, so it only made sense to kind of do Stannis, a character that very closely linked to someone like Renly. We might even do Robert Baratheon in next episode. I've just got done reading Ned 2, and talking about Stannis, we're going to run into a lot of things with Robert. So, yeah. Hi, Jim. How are you? And yes, we are doing Stannis today, everybody's favorite character. And, yeah. So, I guess I'll wait till a couple more people get in here, and I'll kind of start off. But let me know as you guys are coming in. Jim, how are you? How's life? What'd you do today? Do anything fun? But yeah. So another thing, I want to know from people that are like either just coming into the stream or whatnot. How do you guys like the YouTube Shorts? I haven't done YouTube Shorts before, so I'm interested to see if you guys like them or not, or if you guys have any ideas. I'm releasing a new YouTube, or I don't know if I actually released it yet or not, but I recorded one about Jaime and Robert. And who would win in a fight, so that's going to be up, I think, probably Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. I have a new hate for Stannis while reading Clash of Kings for the first time. He is so stubborn. Yes, it is something that's very interesting, Haley, that we're going to talk about with Stannis' characters, that Stannis is, as a person, because of the people that surround him and how he grows up as a child and what he experiences or what he's shown by other people, he becomes this person that he comes set in his ways. I don't really like YouTube Shorts, but it does help with the algorithm, so maybe go for it. I kind of like doing them, just like quick little videos and things to do while, I'm not uploading a bigger video. So when I'm not uploading, on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I can kind of give you guys something to watch if you guys wanted to watch something. But, yeah, so I'm kind of like figuring out what kind of topics I want to do if I want to do shorts, if it's going to be like a little short-term like subject, or it's going to be kind of more of a bracket type thing. Hi Matthew, how are you? He is very set in his ways. If someone doesn't follow him, he hates them, but wants people to like him so bad and does nothing to be liked. So again, Haley, I think that's a very interesting concept, and we're going to get into it, but the one thing that I think Stannis does not understand, and it's one of his big flaws, is that Stannis does not understand why people give someone like Robert the same amount of love as him. And they have fundamental differences of character. So when we get into their characters, there's things early on in their lives that contradict each other. And Stannis was a character that was much different when he was just growing up than who he becomes. As we're going to talk about, there's a lot of different situations. But getting into Stannis' life, he is born in 264 AC. He is the second son of Lady Cassana Estermont and Stefan Baratheon. And again, he has an older brother, Robert, and Renly. Renly comes a little bit later. But what I think is interesting is that one of my favorite stories about Stannis and both Robert when they were young is that when they go to King's Landing, they quote-unquote meet the king, but in reality, they actually end up meeting Tywin, because Tywin is sitting on the throne. He was holding court for Aerys instead. And Stannis was very impressed by Tywin. Now, I want to, again, point this out, because Stannis and Tywin are not that far from each other, and their demeanor and how they handle situations. Now, Tywin is better at using his power to make friends. Tywin is a better politician than Stannis is, whereas Stannis is a better military leader. It's hard to do a Song of Ice and Fire with shorts. I agree, Jim. So the things I have been kind of thinking about doing is either short, like form topics, like responding to maybe other people's topics, or just doing things that I can answer really quickly, right? So again, like I talked about, I am doing a YouTube short, which is a response to somebody else that I saw on TikTok, where they said that Robert Baratheon in his prime would beat Jaime Lannister in his prime, and I'm someone that just does not believe that. I think Jaime would beat Robert, but again, up to interpretation. So I'm going to do that as YouTube short, something I can answer pretty quickly. I like how, though in universe Stannis isn't loved but among the fandom, he's one of the most beloved characters. Yeah, it's a very interesting idea that Stannis, again, gets no love in A Song of Ice and Fire, but for like the actual fan base, I think he has a pretty huge following. Robert Baratheon in his prime versus the Mountain would be interesting. I agree. That'd be a really interesting fight. I think I'd probably have Robert winning that fight. I think Robert would be a bit more skilled in how he uses his weapon, and he has kind of the size to maybe match someone like the Mountain. I'd be interested to see, though, like, what Robert's reach is compared to the Mountain, because that could make a huge difference. Hi, Andrew. How are you? And so, again, we see how Tywin looks up to a figure, or not Tywin, Stannis looks up to a figure like Tywin, something that I think is interesting in the way Stannis holds himself and has this very serious demeanor. Now, again, this is something I think is very interesting, is that Stannis finds this Goshhawk, I hope that's how you say it, and it had been injured. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it paints Stannis very differently in his childhood than when he gets older. Because he has this bird, and he kind of brings it back into health. But people around him, now this is the important part, people around him scold him for it, right? Robert, his brother, calls it weak wing, that it will never fly high. And so what we see here is Stannis is being told from a young age that weakness is not okay, right? Having some sort of issues is not okay. Strength is the way, because that's the way Robert is kind of showing this, right? And again, we see that Robert has his own falcon, which is named Thunderclap. And again, even Stannis' great uncle, Harbert, convinced him to abandon the bird, and that Stannis was making a fool of himself. So again, I think it's an interesting idea that multiple people that are related to Stannis are showing him that he can't have weakness, that making a fool of himself is bad. Those things should never happen. That he needs to be taken very seriously. It's the same persona we see with a character like Tywin, where he doesn't like laughter. Stannis is very similar in that regard, where we don't see Stannis laugh. We don't see those things very often. So again, I thought that was very important to point out that Stannis could have gone on a very different trajectory if it wasn't for, as we'll see later on, his mother and father dying, people around him telling him this is how he has to act. So it's an interesting way. The actor for Stannis was perfect, man. Sucks how the actor that played Stannis was really good and kind of knew how Stannis portrayed himself. I have the name up on the screen, Stefan Delane, I believe. And I just think the writers who were actually writing Stannis' character had no idea who he is as a person, in my opinion. I'm not a follower of the Red God, so Stannis does not have my support. Well, Matthew, you're a sinner, so it's okay. Shame. How tall is the Mountain? 8 feet tall, great sword with one hand. I would put money on Gregor. Okay, you know, like, I don't mind that. I personally think Robert would win, but I'd have to see, like, specifically what the reaches are, because if Gregor has a bigger reach, then it would be a much tougher fight for Robert. Stannis could have been amazing in the show if D&D didn't let their Renly bias ruin his character. I agree. Stannis was a character that they just never developed his backstory and what makes him such a tragic character. They didn't really go into who Stannis is as a person, right? We only see kind of the front of his character. So, moving on. And again, this goes into this idea that what you see as a child and what experiences you have as a child really develop you. And that's something that's, I think, is on full display with Stannis, because Stannis kind of grows up in the shadow of his older brother, Robert. Now, this is something that I really want to take away here, is that Renly, yes, also kind of lives in Robert's shadow, but Renly has all of the benefits of looking like Robert, being, again, attractive and all of these things, where Stannis doesn't really have these things. Stannis is never really described as being a very attractive guy. He's more like, you know, he's medium, but he doesn't also have all of these other features that, like, Renly and Robert have. Now, he does have some of them, like, he does look like a Baratheon, but he doesn't, like, look like a carbon copy of Robert's, where Renly does. So Renly will get attention because of that, and Renly being the youngest, also gets attention. Stannis is literally that middle child syndrome where he gets the least amount of attention, really, it feels like. And so this kind of makes it where Stannis has to grow up much quicker than any of his other brothers. Where Renly's allowed to be a child, Robert is allowed to kind of... Robert kind of... He always feels like this not mature, not taking things seriously type of guy. Stannis is the complete opposite. And we even see this with how Cresson describes Stannis, right? That Stannis felt like the kid that was the most unloved and needed the most support. And that's why Cresson kind of takes such a connection to Stannis because of that. Because of his parents dying. There was no one really there for Stannis. And we even get, like, after this point, like what we've seen here with how Robert and his great uncle kind of lean into what Stannis should be as a person, Stannis becomes a very introverted child. And he is known to have been mature beyond his years and kind of joyless, kind of how we talk about with Renly, where Renly tells Stannis, you have no joy. You just don't have anything you enjoy in your life. I forgot, does Robert ever explain why he gave Stannis Dragonstone and Renly got... No. So I don't think this is ever talked about in the book, but I know when we're going to get to some quotes, even people like Cersei believe that giving Stannis Dragonstone and giving Renly Storm's End was meant to be a slight. I don't think ever see Robert's opinion on that. We kind of have to deduce what he was thinking there. So there is that idea that, yes, giving Stannis Dragonstone could have been a slight. We don't know. It's not confirmed by Robert. But we have to kind of look at context clues as to maybe why he did it. Renly deciding he deserves the throne instead of Stannis is exactly how the youngest child treats... Exactly. It's the perfect middle child example. Stannis turns to the Red Gods because his parents died at sea and the Seven did not save them. It would suck if the Walkers turn up and he realizes that he is not the Azor Ahai. Agreed, Leo. And the other idea that I think is interesting is not only like his parents dying, but look at Stannis' life. Stannis hasn't had a happy life. Even though Stannis has been put in this position of, I guess, privilege, because again, he is a High Lord. He grows into, or he not grows, but he lives in wealth. He's very lucky considering what the average peasant is, but all of this considered, Stannis has all these things. He's not a very happy person. So making a switch from, say, the Seven, who his parents would have believed in. His parents die at a very young age. And also you have the idea that there could be some power with the Red God that Stannis could use. So again, it's kind of that double-edged sword where I don't think Stannis really has a problem getting rid of the Seven, and he also sees a benefit of maybe using the power of the Red Gods. Because again, or the Red God, I don't think Stannis himself truly believes in Mel's religion. Stannis is so consistent with his decisions. What would Stannis do? Exactly. Stannis is one of the most consistent characters. Like, it's very, like, if you're doing a what-if scenario, it's actually really easy to, like, look at what Stannis would do. For loyalism is definitely the true religion through all the miracles and correct prophecies about the others. I don't know if I would go that far, Mystery. I think that it does have a lot of power, and we have seen some things that work, that there is some form of a power. Maybe it is the Red God is real, but I would not go that far on that. There's no true religion in A Song of Ice and Fire. I kind of agree with Ander here, because even like Mel, who is supposed to be this prophet, she's not able to really interpret the vision she's getting like completely right. So it kind of, I feel like Reloralism, that is a tough word to say for me, can be misleading at times. I think he's just so lost and cling to the religion just because. I agree, Haley. I could see that. What's the Seven ever done, though? I mean, Mystery, I agree. I think the Seven is supposed to represent Christianity in Westeros, where it's a faith-based thing, where you have to just put your faith in it. And that's kind of how I look at that. And I kind of agree with Ander, right? And I think that's the whole idea with the Seven, is this idea that Well, we haven't seen the Seven really do anything. Like they haven't been directly involved, and we're not going to go fully into Christianity or whatever, but Christianity is based on this thing where God is not exactly like present doing things right in front of you. It's built more on a faith thing. That's kind of what the Seven is about. Why did Stannis marry into such a small house? Now, I've done a video on this, David, and we're going to get there. It's like after Robert's Rebellion, so I'll talk a little bit more on this. But it is a very interesting idea as to why he would do that. Because it's not a great house to marry into. We see later on in the story, he doesn't get a lot of power off of his marriage. There's much better relationships that could have came out. Like, what if Stannis had married into, say, the Hightowers or the Tyrells? I don't actually know if there was somebody that he could have married in the Tyrells, but you get what I'm saying. He could have, or maybe not him, but there could have been a better arranged marriage. That relationship really doesn't make a ton of sense when you look at it. So this kind of leads us to the last part, getting into Robert's rebellion for Stannis. As Stannis and Robert both were present and watched as their parents died. And like we've been talking about here, this is where Stannis kind of lost his faith in the Seven. The Seven is more interesting to me in the later seasons of the show, season 4, 5. The Seven really does not do anything. There is no rhyme or reason. I kind of agree with that, Haley. Agreed, Leo. Agreed. I'm excited to keep reading the books and see where everything goes. They are fantastic books, and I hope you enjoy them, Haley. They are really good. I definitely think you should give them a good read. There's just a lot that I think are amazing that were not present in the show. So, getting into Robert's rebellion. So, this is another interesting moment in Stannis' life where Stannis at this point is, by all means, the Lord of Storm's End. He's the person in charge. Robert is off in the Vale with Jon Arryn and Ned Stark. And the Mad King Aerys says, well, I want their heads. He basically says, I want Ned, Robert's heads. So, with this being said, Stannis, being the person he is, a very, maybe not honorable is the right word, but he's very loyally driven, and he likes laws. Like, he likes to follow what is set in stone. And now we have this decision where, should Stannis back his rightful king? Should he back his brother? And now you have an interesting decision. Because Stannis comes to this head, and it seems like a very straightforward decision for maybe the normal, person. But from Stannis' view, I think he views the situation, and it's like, okay, well, his duty is telling him, well, maybe I should go for the king. He is the king. But at the same time, I have a duty to my brother. And does family go over king? Well, how does that work? It's a very compelling and interesting decision here that Stannis has to make. And we do know that Stannis goes and supports his brother. But it's something that, do we think about, does Stannis maybe regret that decision? Because Robert doesn't treat him well after this. Robert doesn't give a bunch of credit to Stannis. I haven't touched a Song of Ice and Fire book in like a year. Don't blame you on that. They're awesome. They're awesome. Feast is good. Don't listen to the haters. Storm is S class. Yes, I think all the books are very good. For me, Feast is, I'd say, the worst, but it's still a very good book. That is correct, Haley. And Haley, really enjoy the last couple chapters leading into the Red Wedding when you eventually get there. I think that is some of my favorite parts of any of the book, or even reading in general. I love the way George crafts those chapters leading up to that chapter, so I hope you enjoy those. Storm is the greatest single book in sci-fi fantasy ever made. I would not go that far. I would say Storm of Swords is probably my third, but I am biased towards Clash, and I also am a big fan of the Fellowship of the Ring. I'm glad I made it to the stream. Stannis is one of the most interesting characters. Great content, BTW, man. I just watched your Hightower video. It was pretty dope. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words. But let us continue. So, during Robert's Rebellion, Stannis is not really too heavily involved. Stannis, at this point, is at Storm's End, and he's basically has to hold it. What is the third book, Grease? The third book, if you're asking of my favorites, is Storm, and then for Song of Ice and Fire, it's the third one. So, while Stannis is here, again, a ton of hardships, not a lot of pleasure, not a lot of nice stuff, because he's, again, sieged by the Tyrells, and they're starving. Like Stannis, what is my favorite books? So my favorite books are, in order for top 3, would be... Actually, I'll do my top 4. So my top... I'll do my top 5 favorite books. So top 5 favorite books. 1 is Fellowship of the Ring. 2 is Clash of Kings, or Clash of the Kings. 3 is A Storm of Swords. 4 is Game of Thrones. And 5 is Return of the King. Two Towers is my least favorite of the 3 Lord of the Rings books. But with that being said, we also see how Davos kind of helps them. He brings them some food when they're on the edge. Like Stannis, at the time when Davos comes in and saves the day, like they're probably pretty close to having to surrender or probably starve out and die. So it's an interesting time period we see here. We see here Stannis' sense of justice, where Stannis is this person that he believes, again, we see this as a famous quote, one good deed does not kind of outweigh the bad. And we see how this happens, right? Davos is given a lordship. He's given knighthood and all this. But at the same time, he has to pay for his past crimes. And he removes the first joint from each finger of Davos' hand. And Davos personally asks that Stannis does this himself, to which Stannis obliges to. So it's interesting the way Stannis kind of goes along with some of the old ways that Ned talks about, where the man who passes the sentence should do it. So Stannis kind of goes into that route as well. So we see some similarities with like a character like Stannis and Ned in that regard as well. And I would be interested to see like how Ned would have handled the situation with Davos, because as much as Stannis kind of has some dislike for Ned, the two are kind of similar in that regard. And I would be really interested to see how Ned would have handled a situation like that with Davos. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think Ned would have just been grateful and looked past Davos's past crimes as a smuggler? Or do you guys think he would have done something similar to what Stannis does? Also, I have my tea as always. It's weird because I only drink streams, or not, only drink streams. What the hell? I only drink tea when I do these streams on Monday, and I kind of wish I drank tea more often. But yeah, I personally think Stannis dies in, like, the last chapter of Winds. Man, this is making me want to reread A Song of Ice and Fire. I love A Song of Ice and Fire. I try to read it, you know, at least once every, like, year and a half. It is usually what I try to do. Yes, great English. I am not a great English. I don't know how people are fluent in multiple languages. I struggle with English. Like, I don't know. People that are like translators and can speak multiple languages have all of my respect. Ask your question again. So, Haley, do you think if Ned was put in the same situation as Stannis, so Ned's at a siege, and Davos comes, saves the day, is feeding them, do you think Ned would just kind of look past his past crimes of smuggling? Or do you think Ned would take a similar approach to Stannis, where he would reward Davos, but he would also punish him for his crimes? Paul says, I think Ned would have felt obliged to punish Davos in some way. I don't think he would have mutilated or killed him, though. Perhaps he would have sent him to the Watch. Now, that's another interesting idea, Paul. Is that a worse sentence? Because Davos is losing his finger bones, correct? But it's not like he's losing his hand. So, would you say that's worse punishment than going to the wall? It's an interesting idea. He would show mercy. He is not a harsh man. I agree, Leo, but at the same time, Davos is a smuggler, and Ned is very honor-bound and does like his justice as well, when it's appropriate. I think Davos would have been sent to the wall. Interesting. Being sent to the wall as far... Yeah, I agree. I don't know. That's a very interesting conversation that That would be a great question. Like, if I ever was to like have a talk with George, that'd be something I'd be very interested in talking about. Another question I'd have for George would be, to what extent like does Catelyn like maybe abuse, or what is her treatment of Jon? Because I have taken it very differently than some of my other viewers that have like talked about it in my comment sections when I got to, I think it's Catelyn 2 or Catelyn 2, Jon 2. I'd rather lose my fingers and become a lord than go to the wall. I completely agree. Ned would have pardoned Davos. Okay. Davos thinks of his hand as a good thing. Like in the books, he likes looking at his hand, knowing Stannis didn't kill him. So if he did get sent to the wall, IDK if he would do well there. That's true. That's another good point, Haley. That's a great point. Yeah, I think you guys have some good opinions on that, but that's something I did want to bring up for the stream. So we now see that kind of the war is coming to an end. The sack of not King's Landing. Well, yeah, the sack of King's Landing happens, but not that. The siege of Storm's End is lifted by Ned. All of that kind of happens. And something that I think we see a lot here with Stannis is that Stannis, when he succeeds, gets no credit, but when Stannis, quote-unquote, fails, he gets all the blame. So, for instance, we see this right away. At the siege of Storm's End, Ned gets all the credit for Storm's End. He gets all of it. Stannis gets none. And then two, so Stannis is then tasked with building a new royal fleet to seize Dragonstone, because that's where Queen Rhaella is, that's where Dany is. Well, she's not born yet, but she will be. And Viserys is. And that's like the last Targaryen stronghold at this point. Stannis assembles a fleet, but before he even gets there, he has no control over this. Some Targaryen loyalists get them out, right? So Dany's been born, Viserys, get them out, so that when Stannis gets there, they're not even there. And Robert holds that against Stannis, right? So again, we see this idea that Stannis believes that Robert punished him for that and gave him Dragonstone because of that. Which is an interesting idea, because why is Stannis getting all this blame for something he can't control? Like, Dany and Viserys getting away happens way before Stannis could have even stopped it, right? This happens before the assault on Dragonstone even begins. I would pick the wall. I like my fingers and I need them on the wall. Fair enough, Haley. Fair enough. What would you do, Grease? Lose your knuckle bones or go to the wall? I would lose my knuckle bones. I am someone that doesn't mind the cold. Like, I kind of like the cold more than I do, like... So, like, if you ever told me, would you rather live in, say, Alaska or live in, like, the desert? I would choose Alaska every single time. I do not like, really extreme heat. So, I don't mind that part of it, but I think the part of it would be, like, not being able to have a family, not seeing any of my family. It just doesn't seem like a great life. The wall is a very, not great place. And if I'm only losing like my finger bones, like, and I'm being made a lord, and I'm gonna be put in a solid position, I think that is the way to go. Also, you can help your family. Your family can be put on better places, or you can be put in a better position. The wall will be a worse punishment, as Davos was accustomed to freedom of movement. That's a great point. That is a very good point from Jay Chandler. Stannis' backstory is so good. I think Stannis has one of the best backstories in the entire Song of Ice and Fire world. What Ned would have been giving him the choice, wall or fingers. Okay. I've always wanted to go to Alaska. Yeah, I think going to Alaska would be awesome. I think it should just be beautiful up there. Is Davos' son at the wall? No, his son is at the wall with Mel right now. The wall, as described in the books, really doesn't seem that bad, at least up until the Great Ranging. It's baffling that there are apparently people who would rather die than go up there. Yeah, I kind of agree. That's something that I do think, like, if I was in a position where I was going to die or go to the wall, I'd rather go to the wall. I mean, I don't know. The stream is making me like Stannis more. Good. He is regardless of if you even like Stannis as a character, you can't deny he has a fantastically laid out backstory that makes him a very compelling character. Like, for instance, I am not like a huge fan of Aemond or anything, but I love Aemond's backstory. I love what Aemond is involved in the story of House of the Dragon or the Dance of the Dragons. So Stannis at this time becomes Lord of Dragonstone, and there's kind of a couple reasons that I think this happens. So one, this could have been a deliberate slight by Robert. He knows that giving Stannis Dragonstone, one, it's not great because A, it's Dragonstone. You're living in kind of a foreigner's castle, or like you just kind of destroyed this entire family and now you're staying in their castle. And it's their ancestral home. It's not great. It's like you're basically living in a castle of ghosts. It's like Harrenhal. Two, if there was ever going to be a Targaryen like rise up again, there would be a strong likelihood they would probably go to Dragonstone, like we see what Dany's probably going to do. And then also, because you're named like the Lord of Dragonstone, your income or your wealth and or superiority is not as high as, say, ruling Storm's End. So again, there's a lot of negatives that come with that. But I think if you look at it from Robert's point of view, it makes perfect sense to make Stannis the Lord of Dragonstone, at least to begin with. Stannis at this point is your heir. Stannis is someone that you know is military tested, that can hold a castle, just like he did with Storm's End. And at this point, we know that Robert is very worried about down the future, say Viserys brings the Dothraki over. He wants someone like Stannis to be able to hold that. So again, we see why I think Robert would do it. I think Robert may have been a little pissed off with Stannis, but I think Robert understands why Stannis would be a great person to have there. If Stannis was given Dragonstone because he was the heir, he'd be named Prince of Dragonstone instead of Lord of Dragonstone. That's a great point, Mystery. That is a great point. It's a very interesting thing that never happens. It is very evident that Stannis is a Song of Ice and Fire perpetual middle child. That is correct. I don't remember why Robert disliked Stannis so much. How could he get along with Ned in that case? So, Leo, the reason that Robert never really liked Stannis very much is, one, we look at the idea that we just talked about where Stannis, yes, does capture Dragonstone, but in Robert's mind, he lets the Targaryen kids get away. So, with that being said, now the Targaryen line doesn't end. And that was what Robert wanted. Robert, we note in Ned 2, I've been just recording the video right before the stream, Robert wants all of the Targaryens dead. He views them as dragon spawn, and he still, even years after Robert's Rebellion, hates them. And if we also look at Stannis and Robert, fundamentally, they're very different. Robert is this person that is liked by everyone. He's kind of like Renly in a way, where he's very flamboyant. He gets along with other people very well. Stannis is someone that doesn't enjoy these pleasantries. He doesn't like whoring. He doesn't like this or that. Where I think the reason that Robert likes Ned a bit more is because Ned, just in general, has a bit more of a personality to him, where Stannis kind of keeps all that inside. He's much more of an introvert, where we see that Ned can still like have fun. And then also you see as Robert and Ned were brought up as brothers, basically. It doesn't feel like Robert and Stannis were brought up like that at all, because for one, Robert and Stannis' parents were absent. Like even before they die, right? Like their parents still are over in Essos for a little while. Exactly right. Crescent is exactly right, by the way, on that part of that, as well as Ander. I think it was for the best that Stannis didn't succeed in capturing Dany and Viserys. Ned would be pissed if they were butchered. Yeah. So that would bring up another interesting question. If Stannis does capture Viserys and Dany, how does that go down? Is Stannis ordered to kill them? Does Stannis give them to Robert and then Robert kills them? Because they're going to die. That's going to happen. Would this turn people against Robert as he just kills innocent children? a lot of interesting things could happen in that scenario. Ned seems like the kind of guy who, once you get to know him, is actually pretty pleasant. I don't think the same could be said about Stannis. Agreed, Paul. It's kind of almost how Ned is a bit how I kind of view myself, where on that regard of it, where Ned is someone that seems kind of quiet, but once you get to know him, is, you know, much more enjoyable to be around. That's kind of how I am. I'm someone that, like, I'm kind of a bit more reserved until, like, I know you a bit more, and then I kind of open up a bit more. Stannis doesn't really feel like that at all. Stannis was about the letter of the law. Ned was about the spirit of the law. There's a difference for sure. I agree with that, Mystery. I agree. So, after all this basically happens and all that, we see that Stannis is married to Lady Cersei. I always struggle with her name. People tell me how to say her name all the time. I still struggle. Florent. And again, we see another slight here. Well, at least Stannis takes it that way. I don't think Robert saw it this way, but Robert deflowers Delana Florent, a cousin of Cersei, on Stannis' wedding bed. So again, we see another way, or Celise, sorry, my bad. Thank you, Ander. Of just Stannis just, again, getting shit on. Like, it's his wedding night. And Robert's sleeping with another woman who is literally related to his wife in their wedding bed, that they then make a bastard that is to then be fostered at Storm's End. When we look at Robert, he is liked, I think, generally by the community, but this is a big dick move. Like, I don't even, like, Robert was probably really drunk, but still. And I don't blame Stannis for insisting that the boy was a slight upon his wife's house. Like, I don't know. That's just a real dick move. And I don't blame Stannis for pushing him off to Renly and having Renly deal with that whole issue. It's funny that if we were in Westeros and we would likely not like Stannis, but as the audience we love him, think of real life figures that we dislike but might have loved if we were there, we were the audience. Yeah, that's a great point, because even in this world, right, would I want to follow someone like Stannis? Like, that's a great point, and that's something that George plays on a lot, where we understand Stannis and we love the character he is, but would you follow him? Because following someone like Renly, for instance, would be much easier than following someone like Stannis. I don't know. That's a very interesting point there, Leo. Almost like when they said king for a day. Exactly, Haley. Don't sleep on your in-laws. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that'll kind of lead us to the Greyjoy Rebellion. And again, I think this is finally when we see a bit more of Stannis actually getting some respect. Because Stannis is the person that's in control of the royal fleet. He's the one that destroys the Iron Fleet that allows Robert to actually invade the Iron Islands. But even then, right? Even then, Stannis is not given, like, a lot of credit after that point. Like, there's not a lot of credit on Stannis being the one that even allowed the Seven Kingdoms to invade the Iron Islands. So I really think that's another key point where Stannis does not get really all the respect that he deserves. You also see at this time, Axel Florent is now serving as the Castellan for Stannis. Because Stannis now is in King's Landing. He's the master of ships, so he has his duty there. And so he's not really at Dragonstone a lot during this time period, around the Greyjoy Rebellion to the main story. He is, for the most part, in King's Landing. And I think what we kind of get to, wasn't Stannis granted Dragonstone after the Greyjoy Rebellion? Let me actually look. Let me try to find an exact date for you. No, I think he was given Dragonstone before the Greyjoy Rebellion. From what I can tell. I'm on the wiki of Ice and Fire, so I'm pretty sure he was granted it before. Because Renly would have been too young after Robert's rebellion, but he could have had someone like ruling in his stead. Now, I'm not saying, right, that Matthew, it was directly after Robert's rebellion, but it could have been like in a couple of years in between. That's what I'm kind of getting at. But I'm not sure. That's a great question, though. Hi, Random. How are you? So, continuing on. So we get to this time period now where Stannis and Jon Arryn are kind of investigating Robert's kids when that kind of happens in the as well. But something also I want to note here is that Stannis tried to outlaw brothels. And as much as this is not good for the coin of King's Landing, probably a good idea because sexual diseases and all of that shit. So Stannis was definitely onto something, but again, in this time period, and when you think about who is king, probably a bad idea, especially because Robert loves his brothels. But yeah, so there comes this idea that, like, Stannis is a person, right? Even if he gets this idea that, hey, Joffrey, Tom, and Marcella, they aren't actually your kids, what is Robert going to do, or not Robert, Stannis going to do with that information? Robert's not going to believe him without hard evidence. And that's the whole thing that I think why Stannis resents Ned a bit, is that Ned wouldn't have really had to have found hard evidence. Robert would have completely trusted Ned. And that's what I think is really interesting. And when Jon Arryn dies, I think for Stannis, it's kind of like an idea that, okay, I can't really trust anyone else. If I go to Robert, he's not going to believe me. So it's time to get out. I think Stannis really saw where the chessboard was going. And it's a very interesting idea there. So that kind of gets us to the main story. We see Jon Arryn dies. But another thing that's interesting is that Jon Arryn had actually agreed to foster his young son, Robert Arryn, with Stannis. Now, this makes sense from an idea of, okay, I'd rather that happen than someone like Tywin. But at the same time, having Stannis as a kind of like a father figure for Robert Arryn, I don't know if that'd be a great idea. Robert Arryn is like this wimpy kid, and like maybe the idea is like, okay, Stannis is going to toughen him up a little bit. But that would have been an interesting pairing. We could have gotten an entire show on Stannis and Robert Arryn together. What a combo that could have been. Also, you are good, Random Stuff. But a good deed does not wash out the bad. So knuckle bones or the wall. You get them, Leo. You get them. But yeah, so that kind of gets us into a Game of Thrones. Now, again, I want to talk about majorly a misstep of the show. And this is one of the biggest gripes I have with season 1. Stannis is not a character in season 1. And I'm not talking about, oh, we didn't get any scenes of him. Stannis is just like this character we hear like very loosely at the end of the season is apparently this brother of Robert. That's all we know him as in the first season of Game of Thrones. Whereas in the first season of a Game of Thrones, we learn a lot about Stannis. We know who Stannis is before we actually meet Stannis in book 2. And I hate that the show did that. I hate the show didn't really go into detail how Stannis was investigating with Jon about the bastards of Robert. I really hate that whole idea, and we don't really get any characters describing really who Stannis is as a person. But it's a missed opportunity. So at this time, we kind of see Stannis has the royal fleet on Dragonstone, and he's heard to be building up ships, hiring sellswords, and he has brought a Shadowbinder from Asshai. So that's kind of what Stannis is doing during this whole point where we see other characters doing their maneuvering. Stannis is kind of working in the background, and he kind of sees where it's going, because if you're Stannis and you're thinking about what's going on, Stannis now knows from his investigation with Jon Arryn that Joffrey, Tom, and Myrcella are not legit, which makes Stannis the person to be next in line. And when you see randomly, because again, even Stannis is going to believe that probably the Lannisters killed Jon Arryn because they're poking around, that, oh, they might try to kill me or kill Robert. So I myself have to be prepared for this scenario. Now, where I think Stannis missteps is I think Stannis should have involved Renly in this a bit more and developed their relationship so that when Robert does die, Renly has, or Stannis has the backing of Renly. Now, would that have worked? I don't know. But I think Stannis keeping to himself and keeping out of all of this does seem like a blunder militarily. Or not military, politically. It takes Sweet Robin away from Lysa, and that's all that matters. That's true. That would have been good for Sweet Robin, but it would have been interesting. He could have used him to get the veil and marry his daughter to him. Yeah, that's another great point, is that Stannis, he could have, quote-unquote, blackmailed the veil into, like, helping him. And that would have been a major help. If he has the Veil of Arryn, and then he also gets the Storm Lords, that's crazy. That'd be really interesting. His real name is Stan, and what you may ask, well, I leave that up for you to figure out. Oh boy. But yeah, so I don't know. What do you guys think about Stannis kind of just sitting out the events of a Game of Thrones and just kind of keeping to himself? Because he kind of learns this information, and he kind of just chills. I'm interested why you guys, if he should have done more. Now, he was preparing for the war, but maybe he should have been searching out allies, trying to figure out, you know, like, who can I get on my side? So, Clash of Kings, again, it's basically going to follow the events of just Stannis basically building up his power. And again, by the time we get to a clash, Stannis has been slighted by his family again. So I want to go back to the moment when the Mad King had declared for Robert's head and that Stannis chose his family. In this situation, and at every turn, Stannis' family has failed him. Have failed to support him, failed to give him any type of love. Again, we see another situation when Ned is made Hand of the King. Stannis should have probably been the best option to become Hand of the King. It's your younger brother. He's been serving in your court this whole time. It makes most sense to make him Hand of the King. But he chooses Ned. Again, another slight to Stannis, and I think he takes that as a slight. So again, we see as Stannis' family has slighted him, as Renly then makes himself king, and really takes all of Stannis' support. Because if you're Stannis, I think you're thinking, okay, Robert dies, I will now have complete control of the Stormlands. That isn't the case. And there's also this option that's like, okay, well, what are the Tyrells going to do? Could I maybe get them to my side? And now, because of Renly being the little shitter he is, Stannis is in a awkward position. You have the Starks declaring themselves kings of the North. You have Renly taking up that. You have the Lannisters. And the Vale's just sitting out. It would appear. So if you're Stannis, you kind of feel locked. Like, what do you do in this situation? And knowing Stannis' character, he's not going to appear weak. He's not going to seek alliances with people that should be rightfully serving him, like the Starks, like Renly. He's not going to beg. Right? We even see that where Davos, or I think it's actually Crescent, that says, hey, Stannis, well, why don't we make an alliance with Robb? Or why don't we try to make some sort of a marriage alliance with, like, say, Shireen and Robb and Aaron to get the Vale in? And Stannis, basically, or not Stannis, but Selyse and Stannis, more or less, basically say, why should I go begging to all these people? Yes, there is, Paul. That's a good quote about Stannis. And you just see, like, Stannis' rationale here, where he's done all of these things for his older brother Robert because that was his duty. And now when the time comes No one is doing that for him. Renly is not doing that. So Stannis, I think Stannis rightfully so, realized the way he was going to be able to take power was through Renly. Because the idea here is that if Renly dies, and this is exactly what we see out, Storm Lords will probably come to his banner. And again, there's maybe like a chance that he's hoping the Tyrells maybe come to his banner. He takes his brother's army, and he wins. That's kind of the initial plan here, because even if that fails, right, Stannis will have this one last chance to try and get Renly to see reason. And it doesn't work. So this kind of leads to Stannis then killing his brother, which again, not a great action. But when you see the way Stannis has gone throughout his whole life, he finally does this action. And we see why he's done it. His whole life, like I just talked about. Also, sorry, Jesse, Nightbot did not like you with your capitals, I guess. But Stannis has just had enough. So I don't know. I think it is a terrible action, you know, killing your brother. But we can see why Stannis does it. Stannis feels like it is his duty to basically secure the Baratheon legacy. He is the person that's supposed to be king by all laws. And I don't know. It kind of comes back to bite him, because then he goes to Blackwater and he loses. Did none of the Stormlands declare for Stannis and rebel against Renly? I'm pretty sure like almost all of them went for Renly. So I don't remember. Some might have gone for Stannis, but if they did, it was a very like few, because most of the people supporting Stannis at this early point is kind of people around Dragonstone. So for instance, the Velaryons, the Celtigars, people like that were coming to the support of Stannis. But hi, Jesse, as well. Renly is out there playing king. Stannis is being annoyed is justified. I agree. Nightbot is rude, yes. The Battle of the Blackwater is pretty stupid. The way the battle is set up, I actually think the battle is pretty good. It's probably one of my favorite parts of Clash. So we see, going into Storm of Swords, Stannis loses this battle. And I think for Stannis, this is, for one, shocking, because Stannis is not really lost. He's never really lost a battle. And it's from, again, Renly being who he is, kind of sets up Stannis' downfall. Because then the Tyrells, this army that he basically had to screw over the Tyrells to get his own army. Why did they support Stannis? Well, it's because Dragonstone basically is like the lordship of the surrounding lands. So that's pretty much why. It's exciting, but it doesn't really make any sense. Why do you think that, Jesse? But that's pretty much why Ultraviolet. Also, hi, Violet. How are you? That's more or less why. And I think A Storm of Swords is kind of this point where I think Stannis is like at his lowest moment, right? His army is destroyed. He's now, he contemplates his brother's death quite a lot throughout the book series. I don't know. I think it's this interesting point where we get to this idea to where how desperate is Stannis? Because Stannis is constantly being pulled to two different sides, Davos and Mel. Should Stannis burn these people? Should he do this or that? And I agree with you, Paul. I think it makes sense that they would support Renly, because Renly, for one, is more liked than Stannis. Two, Renly has been ruling over the Stormlands for a while now. And Stannis is more seen as kind of the person in charge of Dragonstone now. It doesn't even really feel like Dragonstone, or not Dragonstone, Stannis is in charge of the Stormlands anymore. Stannis didn't plan on killing Renly. I don't know that theory, but that would be very surprising to me. That's an interesting point, Jesse. That's an interesting point to think about. But we kind of see by this whole kind of playing on Stannis' morals and what he'll do, eventually Stannis gets this letter, and Davos urges him to set sail for the wall. And that the idea here is that the king should protect his people, or he is no king at all. So Stannis goes north. And Stannis going north helps take out the wildling threat. So again, Stannis, pretty good military commander. We see that at the battle for the wall. There's not really a whole lot I really want to talk about in that part of it. And that kind of leads us to the last part of Stannis' kind of story and getting kind of into Winds of Winter. Stannis didn't kill him. It was Brienne and other members of the Rainbow Guard. You're right. You're right, Paul. You're right. It's a conspiracy. You're right. I think it's interesting that there are actually rumors that Catelyn killed Stannis. Like, could you, or not Stannis, Renly? Could you think about that? It's like, yeah, there's a woman who is not known as a fighter or anything somehow killed Renly. Like, that's a wild theory to be believing if you're a common person, but. Melisandre hijacks Stannis' plan to gain more influence over him. Stannis' plan to defeat Renly in battle and take Loras hostage. Interesting. Okay, I could see that, Jesse. That's an interesting theory. But yeah, so we don't see kind of the rest of the story really is just Stannis. He's up at the wall trying to figure out how he can retake the north. Because, again, it's very beneficial to Stannis. And Stannis sees this as a common enemy type thing. Where a lot of the northern houses are not happy with the Lannisters and also the Boltons. These are people that Stannis is going to be against. So Stannis is kind of going with this idea that he can get a common enemy and just have people join him. We see how that doesn't particularly work. Because, again, all of these people want a Stark. And Stannis doesn't have a Stark, and himself, he is not a Stark, and he is very much an outsider to the north. So, again, we see through various reasons how Stannis is going to try and take the north. He has freed Deepwood Mott from the Greyjoys. He now has Asha and Theon as prisoners at this point. Stannis is trying to give his reputation a boost. He's trying to show that he is someone that is willing to fight for the North when no one else is. And we'll see if that works. I had a great day. Also, my sister says Stannis is the autistic rep she's always needed. He's her favorite character. You love to see that. I'm glad that it is her favorite character. Makes sense, Jesse. You have an interesting theory. I might have to do some research on that. I think it's very interesting. Do you think Stannis will win or lose the battle? I think he will win the battle with the Boltons. And he will actually take Winterfell, but I think he will actually die to the others. I think he will be someone trying to basically hold Winterfell from the others. It'll be kind of our grand battle at the end, while a lot of our forces are retreating south. Because, again, he's not going to be able to defeat them, I don't think, without Dany. But I agree with you on that, Leo. So, we kind of come to this point now where there's a lot of conspiracies going on in the north. And we have Wyatt Manderly's probably going to flip sides. Stannis is kind of encamped outside of Winterfell. The conditions are going against Stannis. They seem like they're starving. They're fishing. I have not read the theory, Jesse. They're basically starving. They're freezing. Their people are just dying. They're having to eat horses. It's not looking great. But then we also see that Tycho Nestoris, who is an embassy from the Iron Bank, arrives, and that they're going to back Stannis. So there's this idea that, okay, maybe he could get some support from that. Maybe that could play a part in the future wars, even if Stannis is not even alive, that they could maybe back Shireen, but it appears Shireen is going to get burned. Because, again, very differently from the show, Shireen is actually up at the wall. She's not with Stannis, so that's going to be a whole completely different thing. And there's this idea of, again, the night lamp theory, which we're not going to go too far into, but just think about it like it's a deception, right, to get the phrase onto this ice that they've been fishing on, and they're basically going to kill themselves, more or less. And that also the Manderlys are going to flip sides. The North is so much more interesting in the book. You would have no idea if you just watched the show. Agreed. The North is completely different. The Nightline theory is one of the best theories around. It's so good and so implied that it's almost isn't even a theory. Agreed, Paul. One realm, one god, one king. There you go. But yeah, so there's a lot of things going on with Stannis going forward, and I personally, like I've talked about in this stream, and as we've gone through with Stannis' life, Stannis has always been about duty. And what is Stannis' duty that he will be facing in Winds of Winter? I think it's going to be the idea of the wildlings, where he has to protect his people. And I think Stannis will try to do that, where he'll try to at least beat, whether it's a Night King or just the others as a whole. And I think he will probably die sacrificing his life so that other people can get south. What can he do to help Stannis there and then and there? Nothing. He can't do anything then and there, but for the future, he can definitely be huge. Whether that's him giving sellswords money to Shireen and backing her claim, or if Stannis survives, backing him. So that's more like just a future situation. But it is interesting to see how far the Iron Bank will go for someone to repay their debts and to get their gold. I do love that theory, Ultra. So I've done a video on that theory that you're talking about, and I think it's a decent theory. Because Stannis, again, is a king. We've gotten a vision from Dany when she's in the House of the Undying that seems eerily similar to Stannis. I really like that theory. I like the theory that Stannis becomes the Night King. I think that'd be really cool. But that is going to be the stream for the most part. I don't really have anything else I want to talk about with Stannis. I think we did a pretty good job, went through majority of his life, and what motivates him as a person. He will die and become a white. I could also see that as well. But yeah, that is going to be the stream, guys. Thank you for all coming in, and I will see you guys all in the next stream.